What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Paranormal Rush Hour. I'm your host, Ryan Rush, and I really appreciate everybody joining me today because I have got something really cool to talk to you guys about. And this is another one of those crazy things on the planet that we always discuss here at the PRH. So, anyway, I'm going to be talking about goblins, particularly the goblins that have been recorded in sightings and stories. I've got some cool stories for you guys today. Some that you have never heard, I'm sure. Some of you may have, who knows. But one of them's well known, and we'll get to that in just a second. First, I want to give a shout out to my youngest fan, most likely, Claire. Claire is one of my most dedicated fans from what her dad tells me. And I really appreciate you watching, Claire. It's all up to you little guys to keep this stuff going so we can find the answers to all of our mysteries here on Earth. So, your dad's doing a good job putting you in the right place here at the PRH. Anyway, I really appreciate you watching, Claire. Thank you so much. And all of you who are watching and continue to watch, I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you very much for all that you have done to support me and help me out. And also, Leonard, I got your package. Right here is the new artwork by Leonard Mott Jr., my friend, who provides me with amazing paranormal art that I like to display right here. This is a Hopkinsville Goblin. This actually got me going on this show because I've wanted to do one on the goblin subject for a while, especially since I did the Hellier episode. But this kind of got me on track. So thank you, Leonard, for that, for the motivation, and for the amazing art that you've sent me. All of it is just too cool. I mean, really, I wanted to display other ones, like, all over the place. Maybe I will one day. I'll figure it out. Anyway, that one is awesome, though. The way the watercolors and stuff, I love it. So thanks again. And I'm also wearing my Ghost Biker hat from my friend Miranda Young's show, Ghost Biker Explorations. Please go check her out. She does a quality production and makes this look like, never mind. This looks awesome too. But compared to Miranda's show, yeah. Anyway, it's a good one though. You guys go check her out. All right, now on to the goblins. All right, the Hopkinsville Goblins. This is probably the most well-known case of goblin lore that there ever was. And I don't even know that it was actual goblins like we would call them, like we would think of them. I think these were actually more along the lines of extraterrestrials. So, anyhow, this happened in Christian County, Kentucky, near Hopkinsville and Kelly, Kentucky, on August 21st, 1955. And there were two families involved. One was the Taylors, the others were the Suttons. This was at the Suttons' farmhouse. Okay, the Taylors, Billy Ray Taylor and his wife, were in town, and they were visiting the Suttons, who were their friends, and they were all having dinner. There were about 11 or 12 of them. I've heard both. I think I've heard 11 the most, so there were probably 11 people. But anyway, so around a dozen people in the house. And Billy Ray Taylor decides to go outside and fetch some water from the well. Well, when he goes out there, he notices in the sky there is a flying saucer shooting across the sky pretty low, and it has a trail behind it of light, and it was all colors of the rainbow, he said. Just an extremely colorful, bright trail behind this flying saucer. And he sees it descend and looks like it went down in a field that was roughly a block and a half away from the place he was at. So he goes in the house freaking out, telling everyone what he saw. This was 1955. People did not see UFOs and believe in them like they do now. So, of course, they were telling him he saw a meteorite, a shooting star, anything but a UFO. But his friend Lucky, being the curious man he was, decides to go out with him and check it out. So they walk outside. They go out in the yard and see a light in the woods. It's a glowing, like greenish colored light coming toward them. And it finally gets close enough to where they can make out that it is a humanoid being of some sort. It's not walking, it's actually floating. And it's wearing a shiny silver spacesuit looking thing, is how they put it, I believe. And it was glowing. This thing was glowing. And it was moving toward them, and they did not like it. So they said it had two big ears, two large eyes, a slit for the mouth. The arms were disproportionately longer. It looks just like what Leonard drew. That was their depiction, pretty much, of what these Hopkinsville Goblins looked like. So, this creature at the moment, was heading toward them. They run inside and tell everyone something is out there. They go and grab the guns. Their uncle JC was there. He got one of the guns, Lucky, and Billy Ray grabbed a shotgun and a rifle. They go out and confront these beings. Okay. The grandmother is in the house also. She doesn't know what's going on and can tell that something really is going on out there. So they go out there, and this thing that was headed toward them was about 20 feet away by now to the farmhouse. When they walked out, it kept approaching, or I think it may have stopped actually when they walked out and pointed the gun at it, but it put its hands above its head. And I'll add pictures of the illustrations from this story at the end of the episode if you guys want to check them out. There is an illustration of this. And it puts its hands above its head and makes in some kind of unknown gesture type thing. And they don't know what to do. Its arms are above its head, so they shoot it. Totally threatening thing for that alien to do. Anyway, these guys shoot it, which back in 1955, okay? And let me explain something about people who live in the country for those of you who don't. I've grown up in a rural setting most of my life, and you have guns. They're a part of life. You better have guns in your house if you live out in the woods or out in the country or whatever. You have guns and you use them more often than you think you would. That's just the way it is. So these guys are going to shoot at something they don't know about on their property that looks completely foreign, and they're not going to wait around to see if it's peaceful. I get it. I understand. However, I don't know that this was any type of hostile act. But nonetheless, they shot it. Okay, when they shot it, it made this metal clanking sound. It was like the way that Billy Ray himself, or Lucky, one of the two, had said it was like taking a handful of bullets and throwing them in a metal bucket and rattling them around. That's how it sounded when they would shoot them, like metal ricocheting around and something. It was really strange. So they reported that and said when they got shot, they would fall back, and this thing in particular fell back and did a backward somersault and floated back. But then they would come back again. And it seemed that every time they got shot, this is what happened. Like they were impervious 2 bullets. It's really weird. But they go back in the house after they shoot this one, and he's on the ground, he rolled off the ground and is coming back. So they go in there and they don't know what to make of it. So another one comes up to the window, and JC, the uncle, shoots this one through the window. Okay, the grandmother doesn't know what to think now, and she's freaking out because they're obviously shooting at something. And one comes around the corner of the house to where the back door is. The grandmother sees it, and so now she knows that there is something otherworldly around the house, on their property, and they don't know about it. So they shoot the one through the door, and then they decide to go outside and check to see, because it looked like they had shot it and it fell and didn't roll away, they thought. So they went out there to see if they had actually gotten it. And when Lucky walked out, there was one on the roof waiting, I guess, and it tried to grab him. It throws its arm down and swipes at his head. Well, one of the women grabbed him and pulled him back in. Then Billy Ray goes out and shoots the one on the roof. It falls off the roof. And by that time, they see another one on a tree limb in a maple tree out beside the house. So they shoot it. It falls off the tree, but they roll and get back up. And I think they kind of retreat a little bit or something. The guys go back in the house because the family's freaking out. So these beings come back to the house. They start looking through the windows again, tapping on the walls, all this stuff. And they're basically terrorizing this family. This family's terrified. They don't know what to think about this. This is a completely foreign concept to people at this time. So they don't know what to do. And these goblins or these aliens, whatever, are pretty relentless about trying to get in this house, it seems like. Well, they finally, about 11 o'clock rolls around. This is a couple hours after they had fired the last shot, I believe. 11 o'clock rolls around, and they decide to make a run for it. The trucks were parked a few yards outside by the door, so they decided to find a clearing and run. So they did. They got in the trucks, went down to the police station, because that's all they could do. They didn't have a phone, anything like that back then. So they get in the truck and go to the police station. Policemen are not inclined to really take their story that seriously, but they are instructed to. So they actually call in backup from other cities, because this was late at night, midnight, Someone's coming in with this crazy, fantastical story about being in a gunfight with some unknown beings. So they call in backup from other cities, and they all go out to the Sutton farm to check it out. They see where the evidence of the gunfight, they see, the gunshots, the screens, the shells. They see where there was obviously some sort of gunfire going on. They could tell something was happening, but there was nothing else there. There were no bodies, no blood, nothing. And they went around and talked to the neighbors. The neighbors said that they heard some commotion and they saw strange lights that night, but that was all they could report. So then the cops actually see a light out in the woods, and they say it was like a dim glowing light, but they don't go out there to check it out. And that's all that they saw. Anyway, about 2 o'clock a.m., the Taylors leave and the cops leave. And the Suttons think that the ordeal has come to an end. So they go to bed. Then they hear a noise. The grandmother hears a noise, wakes up, and there's another one right there in the window pressing its face into the screen. So they're back. And Lucky shoots the one through the screen. And the ordeal starts up again for a few hours. They're just walking around the house, looking through the windows, tapping on the walls, tapping on the side of the house, doing just the same thing, basically. and the family's just in there, holed up in the house, So about 5 a.m., daylight approaches, and these things are gone, and they never see them again. Well, then they get invaded by media and people, and it doesn't stop. Like, this story just gets instant attention, most likely from the cops who were there and stuff, telling telling the nature of the story. Anyway, they get people, even coming into their house and taking their things as souvenirs. It's just crazy. People going around the property looking for things, news reporters all over the place trying to interview all of them. And Lucky Sutton was not the kind of guy that wanted any type of attention like this. He rarely even spoke of the incident, his daughter said. And her name is Geraldine Sutton Stith. And she has written books on this encounter. And she heard the stories firsthand from the people who were there. So it's pretty interesting. But anyway, she did say that her dad did not crave attention. He was not one of those people who wanted it. He didn't want to talk about it. Her uncle, JC, she said, couldn't hold down a job after that. He was just really messed up. She said it really affected these people, the things that they saw and what they went through that night. It was traumatic. Sounded like, some PTSD was going on. And I can imagine it would be, especially back then, when you haven't been introduced to really high strangeness like that. It's, it'll take you by surprise. But anyway, so these creatures, they basically, I can't say what happened to them. Did they leave? Are they still in Kentucky? That's what I'm wondering about. I'd really like to know if they have anything to do with the things that they were told about in Hellier, as far as the goblins go with that. I really wonder if there's any correlation there. But it is interesting because one of the pictures that they were sent by that David Christie guy who initially told them the goblin tale and got the whole thing started, he sent them pictures that he had taken that were supposedly of the beings that he was seeing in his yard. And one of them was peeking from behind a tree, and it was glowing. Like, it looked like it was glowing. And it was that they said something about that, in reference to the Hopkinsville case. So, it's kind of weird. I thought that was a really strange coincidence there. Other than someone trying to mock the Hopkinsville case. But here's the thing about that. Okay. They thought about that too. And when Greg, and he tells this in, I think maybe like the first episode, of Hellier season 1, he tells about them going to it's like a shoot for like a B-reel type thing for some kind of video or movie or documentary or something like that. And so they decide to help somebody out and go up to Kentucky. I want to say it was Cave City, Kentucky, and go to where the caves are, these caves, and actually help them out, film some of this stuff, be in this movie or whatever. And they said it may be footage that never even got used, but they did it anyway for a free vacation or something. So, and it turned out to be really interesting and synchronistic because there was a little girl who happened to be riding her bike around on the set, talking to people. And she ends up coming up to Greg and Dana and saying that she heard they were monster hunters or something. And Greg just goes along with it and it's like, yeah, we look for stuff, And she proceeds to tell them this story about these little goblin creatures that come into her yard at night. Her parents have seen them. She's seen them. and she said they don't have any hair. She started describing exactly what that guy had described. And I mean, it was so, and she said they actually come out of the caves in the woods and come up to their yard. And it was just so similar to what they were told in that email that they actually thought somebody might have put her up to it. And this is what got them away from that idea. The girl draws them a picture, and it is almost exactly like the pictures that the David Christie guy sent them, the ones that he had drawn of what these creatures look like. So that's strange. That's really strange. And this is a true thing. And they were like, there's no 6-year-old girl that is going to remember what that looked like well enough to recreate it. And they're like, it was a little kid's rendition of what they were reported to look like. So I thought that was interesting. And I thought that, that lends a lot of credibility to the actual theory that these goblin creatures are there. But why Kentucky? That's what I want to know. Why would it be Kentucky? What is it about Kentucky? Is it the caves? The cave systems? Because I know in Hopkinsville, there are caves. And it's like, I'm trying to remember what they were called. There are, I want to say 2 main caves around there, and they connect to the Mammoth system, I'm sure. The Mammoth Cave system is only about 80 miles, I think, from Hopkinsville. Because Hopkinsville is near the Tennessee line, near Nashville. So anyway, it's near there. So I'm wondering, does that have something to do with it? Why they would be in Kentucky? Is there really bases and stuff down there or up there that we don't know about, but there's a lot of other creatures that live there and have this whole underground civilization going on? Man, who knows? The world gets stranger and stranger, but that's why we're here. Anyway, what would have happened though if they had not shot at them? They didn't seem hostile to me. It didn't seem like them raising their arms above their head was a hostile act, was something that they were going to do. And even something bad they were going to do. But even after they did that, they didn't retaliate. Even after they were shot at, they did not retaliate. They didn't hurt anybody while they were there. At all. They did not harm a soul while they were looking in the house and doing all this stuff. They tried to swipe at somebody, but that was after they had been shot at 7, 8 times. Or actually shot. Not just shot at. Literally shot. So, I can't really blame them for wanting to swipe at somebody's head. I don't guess. But anyway, I wonder about that. Would things have been different? Would that have been the first case of close contact with extraterrestrials? Of peaceful, close interaction? That could have been. And if someone was presented with that scenario today, I'm sure the outcome would not be the same. Now, that's interesting too, because a lot of people thought that it was going to happen again, because the date of the eclipse that happened in 2017, which was the 21st of August, was coinciding with the date of the Hopkinsville Goblin case. So people were theorizing that, when the eclipse happens, the aliens are going to come back. I remember people saying that, and the Hopkinsville Goblin case actually being brought up when the eclipse was happening. I totally remember that. It was crazy. Anyway, there is another story I ran across that really tripped me out, okay? I don't know that this is the same type of creature, but it seems to behave slightly, I mean, well, not, I wouldn't say behave, but there are characteristics that are sort of similar. And I don't know. I'll just get into it and let you guys see what I'm talking about. Okay. I don't know where this happened. I know it happened about 5 years ago. I don't know where. And the people are anonymous pretty much. I mean, we had first names, but, that was it. Anyway, it's irrelevant because this is, I just listen. Okay. These two people, it was a girl and a guy, went into the woods, and they had these little places they hung out at, and they were just friends. They made that specifically clear. Platonic friendship. They just hung out. They were like brother and sister type thing, best friends type relationship, had known each other all their lives. Made that explicitly clear. So they weren't doing anything out there like people would have assumed. And they were talking because she had just broken up with her boyfriend or gone through a bad breakup or something and had a real negative viewpoint on things and just wasn't in a good place mentally. So they went out there to talk and try to get things sorted out with her. And after they got there to their favorite spot, they said, and this was a clearing, like a small clearing in the woods that was outside of their neighborhood, they said. So they went to this one of their favorite spots in the bluffs, they called it. And they were in this little clearing. There was a path that led to the clearing they were in. And the path curved, and at the curve, there were bushes. So she's like looking down the trail and kept staring down there because she thought that she saw a little man standing there in the trail. And this was dark, like a little silhouette. And she said it looked like a shadow, but it was like see-through, like transparent almost. And she saw this and didn't know if it was just her imagination and was trying to figure out whether she was really seeing it or not. And kept staring at it. Didn't say anything didn't mention it to her friend because she wasn't sure if it was actually something she was seeing. Now, the more she stared at it, she said the more solid it became. Then she said it looked like it was transparent, like a transparent shadow, but the outline of it started to solidify. Then the body started to fill in and solidify. And it was clear to her then that something was there. So she said she felt like all of a sudden like she couldn't form words, like she was in a trance. It was like being in shock, being captivated by something. And she said it was holding her in place like only on its own will, like not using anything but its will for her to stay there and be paralyzed, be frozen in place. She said that's what it was like. And once her eyes adjusted and it got closer, she could clearly see it. What she saw was a small man that was no more than 2 feet tall, dressed in all black and like with a cloak or something like that, and boots that shined like in the moonlight. She said she could see the boots shining. And then it had human hands with stubby little fingers she could see. And she said it was real stumpy, like wide, too wide for its height. Like it should be taller for how wide it was. And it had a long, thick nose. and human eyes, but couldn't see enough detail in the eyes at that time to make out anything specific. The eyes, I guess, were shaped like humans. And it had small pointed ears and dark, short, unkempt hair. Okay. So finally, she was able to work up enough will, I guess, to nudge her friend and point at it. And he still hadn't noticed it at this point. But once she pointed at it on the trail, he saw it, and she said literally choked. And said, what the hell was that? So they both started hearing a sound that was like a horse snickering. Like this thing was getting excited, she said. And like it was slowly coming toward them still, too. So she said it wasn't walking, but this is one of the things that I thought was similar to the Hopkinsville encounter. Was she said this thing was gliding. It was like floating. She said she could tell its legs were not moving, but it was moving closer to her. And it was floating above the ground. And she said it had its hands down by its side with its palms facing outward, like it was using its hands to lift it off the ground and move. She said that's what it seemed like it had some kind of force going to make it levitate. Really, really strange. And she said that she tried to get up and run, but was just frozen. I mean, paralyzed, could not move. And she said it was not like being frozen with fear, but it was more like being paralyzed by like force, like something was holding her there. So neither of them could move at this point. They were both being paralyzed by this thing. And she knew she needed to get up and go. She said her brain was registering that she needed to move, like muscles needed to move. She was freaking out. And finally, she hears this. Well, oh yeah, before that, they both start hearing this loud buzzing noise. And she said it sounded like electricity, like an electrical buzz. And they both heard it. And then she started feeling like the air was electrified, like there was static electricity collecting in the air, and her arm hairs were raising up, and it was like she could feel it, like feel the electrified air. And it was like it was charged. So, scared out of her mind, still frozen, hyperventilating, and now she could see everything. She could see this thing clearly. It was close enough. It had moved close enough to where she got a good view of it. And she said that it had an olive-colored complexion. Sorry. Pure black eyes, like solid black. No, like the pupils were extra large, is the way she put it. But it was solid black eyes. And long fingernails. Not like claws, but like long, nasty, unhygienic fingernails. And it had really wrinkled face, really deep wrinkles in its face. Really ugly, she said, like extremely ugly. So finally she was able to half yell, like get a little bit of sound out and yell at it to get away. And she said once she did that, it stopped. It bared its teeth at her, like clenched its teeth at her like it was offended, she said. And she said the teeth were really crooked and gnarly and sharp and just jacked up. Or she said some of them looked sharp. Anyway, it looked at her like it was offended, she said. Like this thing couldn't believe she had the audacity to tell it to go away. And it glided backwards and she said literally disappeared. So this thing did not just go and disappear into the bushes. It literally vanished. And those were her words. And she said she and her friend threw caution to the wind and tore down the trail, straight past where it disappeared. So once they got out of there, they went back. I think they were in a car, went back to their neighborhood, and he took her home. And she said they didn't speak. That was the only time he told her she better get in the house. And that was the only thing that they said to each other. And then she said she even offered to, she said after that, she even offered to let him stay there, but he was really freaked out and wanted to go home. So she said a couple weeks later, they started talking about it a little bit in length and could not figure out what they saw. This was some sort of creature, though, and they said, was it a goblin? Was it a demon? Was it? Who knows? But they did say they wondered if it was a goblin. Now, she made a point to say that she felt like it was feeding off of her negativity, like it was attracted to it. And she felt like that was what it was drawn to, and that's why it was even around her. So that was just how she saw it, what she felt. So I don't know. It's pretty weird. Another weird thing, though, is when I was looking at this story, I found another one that was like right after this one. Like the next one that I had like checked out was an encounter about little people encounters in North Carolina. And the way that they described this sounded a lot like what this girl described. So let me tell you guys about that. Okay, this was in the late 80s. This guy who was telling this was about 14 at the time. And he was in the woods and noticed these weird footprints. They said he and his friends saw these strange footprints. They couldn't tell what it was. It didn't look human, but it didn't really look like an animal. And it made me wonder if it was like three-toed, but he said he really couldn't remember what they looked like and all that. So, anyhow, they had noticed the prints, though. Then they went into the woods, into this little clearing type, or I can't remember what he said it was, like a ridge maybe or something, or a valley or something like that, and saw a little person. It was like a little man standing there about 3 feet tall. And he said that he had on a black robe, like a cloak. And he only had his eyes visible. He said it was like that Star Trek character, the Jeb or somethings. And he had like a hood on with nothing. You couldn't see anything except these red glowing eyes. And he said that was the only thing that was visible. And it just stood there and did nothing. It just stood there the whole time, they said. And they didn't stick around to see what it was going to do, of course. They got freaked out and took off. Well, then he told another friend of his about it and went back to explore. Well, they had a lot of clearings from controlled burns that they were doing, clearing out brush and stuff. So they were in those clearings where they did the burns, and there are slash piles everywhere and all that. And he said there were these little patches of woods around the clearings. And one of them, he said he remembered it specifically. It was 2 trees standing up with bushes in the middle. And they went around those trees, and right there behind the bushes was the same little person standing there, little man standing there. And these were both daylight encounters. And he said he had the same black cloak on, and the eyes were glowing red. And they said that he just stood there again, didn't do anything. And he said he never could see their feet, though, because they were always hidden by the robe, by the cloak that they were wearing, the black robe thing. So he said later on, about a year later, he was out in the same area, general area, and they were sneaking around smoking and stuff because they were teenagers. And they heard a loud crashing coming down the trail that they were in. Wherever they were, there was a trail there that led them to it, and they heard this loud crashing, just like something barreling down the trail. And it was going fast. He said, like moving through the thick foliage and stuff. And he said it got on, or they didn't really stick around to see what was going to appear, but they got on their bikes and ran and took off down the trail. And he said they weren't even like running, like riding their bikes. He said they were running with their bikes down the trail. And they could hear this thing behind them. And he said they got to the road, and it stops right there where the trail ends and meets the road. So it wouldn't like go past that certain point. He said it just stopped and stood there, just staring at him with the red glowing eyes. So that's pretty weird. And that crashing noise, that was weird too, because he said this thing was small. So then another time this was not long after that, where they were at this other little place in the same area, and they heard that crashing noise again. And they said they just started going, and every time they moved, they heard it move. Every time they stopped, it would stop. So there was something weird going on with that at that time too. And this was all in the same place pretty much. So anyway, there was this old neighbor, he said, in his neighborhood that they were talking to. And this was a year or so after the first encounter, or the last encounter where he saw it on the trail. There was this old neighbor of his who they were talking to one day, and he was like telling them spooky stories or something. And then he said that, he had no idea about them seeing this creature or this little person. And the neighbor starts saying, well, something weird happened to me one day out here. He said my dog started going crazy, barking and just going nuts. And he said he grabbed a shotgun and went outside to see what was going on. And went over to where the gate was, and there was he said, looked like a little man standing there by the gate. And he said he couldn't see anything except these red glowing eyes. And he said it was really short. So he points his shotgun at it. And he said he just got this really bad feeling. And that's what that guy said too. He said every time he saw this thing, he'd just get this horribly bad feeling that came over him. So this neighbor was saying the same thing. He felt that feeling, and he said it was almost like a mutual thing between them. And he said they just he was like, it was a kind of I'll leave you alone and you leave me alone kind of thing. And he said they both just parted ways, I guess. But he said it was really weird. And it was the same creature that this guy had seen prior in the woods. So that's really strange too. There was another encounter in the same area from a girl he knew who had snuck out of her house one night, and she was trying to sneak back in so her parents didn't find out. And she was going through her yard, which was really well lit. They had yard lights that illuminated the whole place. And she said that she could see really well in the yard. Well, she was going up to her window to crawl back in, and then gets this really bad feeling and looks behind her, and there's this little man standing in like the middle of the yard. She said dressed in all black with red glowing eyes. And she freaks out, doesn't even care anymore if she gets caught sneaking in, runs to the front door and starts banging, beating on the door to get her mom to let her in. And she did. And so it had to be bad if she was stopped caring if she got caught. So anyway, I thought that was pretty neat. A whole bunch of these encounters right there in the same area, same place. So what's up with that? Is there some little creature out there with red glowing eyes that's only about 3 feet tall and they dress in a black cloak? That's freaky, in my opinion. And why would it be the same thing? And it was just like what this other girl said about the one that she encountered. I wish I knew where that happened. Really wish I knew. Because it would be really interesting to know if it was Kentucky or North Carolina. One of those places. Anyway, I thought these were pretty interesting stories, though. There's something out there, guys. There is something out there that is like this. And I don't know if we'll ever find out exactly what it is, but people have seen it, and I have a feeling they'll still be seeing it because that girl told us that was 5 years ago, So that's not too long ago. This thing is still out there. I mean, and who knows what else or how many there are, or there's no telling. This guy actually said, though, that before I think the first encounter, maybe, it was definitely before the one where they were out smoking and saw it going down or heard it coming down the trail. He said that he saw torches out there and heard chanting out in the woods, like could actually see them way out there and heard chanting out there. And he said there had been rumors, going around forever about devil worship and all that crap, but who knows? And he said that could totally be unrelated, but it's just more weird stuff going on, and you don't know. They could have conjured something up. We have no idea. Anyway, I guess I think that's all I'm going to say about this, guys. I think I've talked long enough about it, given you guys enough to think about, and so you let me know what you think. Leave me a comment and tell me about it, and we'll discuss. And I'll be back with you guys really soon with another video and hopefully another full-length episode. And I'm going to do some paranormals too. I just have been trying to get some longer ones out there for you guys. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching, and please let me know what you think. And I'll look forward to hearing from you guys, and I'll see you soon. So take it easy, everybody.